What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Sunday special. I said in the last video, if you haven't watched her, I don't know how they're going to be released, but Mav's not feeling well this morning. So he and I are home from church. Brooke and Wit went. So I had some time to read up on some of these cases. You guys were sending me some updates happening this weekend. I wanted to record a couple videos to give you my thoughts and see what you thought about it. And this one is really interesting because tomorrow, December 18th, there is a hearing, and it's called a waiver hearing in Ruby Franke's case, the mom from the 8 passengers YouTube video who's been accused of child abuse. And it seems like we are working towards a plea deal. So that is the topic of discussion for today's video. Let me know what you think of that or what you know of that in the comments as we start, as you hit that like button. Getting into the video, I have one of my favorite Christmas zip ups on. It was a crazy windy day. I just went out and checked outside, and a branch fell right on our trampoline, which is annoying. And like a pillow didn't move an inch, but then my grill flipped completely over from the wind. So really wild, but we'll deal with that later. For now, we are going to get into the fact that Windward Law, who's representing Ruby Franke, had given some quotes back in November, I think November 29th. The reporter that's been handling this case the whole time, and we've showed some videos on our channel. I can't remember his name right now. He's been awesome to watch and keep us updated, said that they told him that they're hoping this case comes to a resolution soon. And that was back, I believe, on November 29th. And then we have this hearing on December 18th, and we have a new statement from Windward Law that we're going to read together. Later in the episode, we're going to watch a video from a couple weeks ago from Kevin Franke, Ruby Franke's husband, with the context now and the hindsight being 2020 and what we know now that we didn't know then, and how that could apply to some of the quotes and things that he said. We're going to play a couple chunks of that video. We haven't watched it together on the channel yet, and it doesn't specifically talk about pleading guilty, but we have kind of thought that there was a track for Ruby Franke's case, and it has continued on that track a little quicker than we may have thought. But with the holidays and end of the year, it doesn't surprise me that she would want to move this along sooner rather than later. So let's pull the statement up here. All right. And you can't really see it on this view. Let me see. Is this view better? No. Where's that other view? This one? No. This one. There we go. All right. Windward Law is making a statement on behalf of Ruby Franke. And yes, we're getting this from Reddit, if you can't see the top of the screen, which is always going to be always funny now since the Maya case. Windward Law is making a statement on behalf of Ruby Franke regarding the pending charges in the Washington County 5th District Court, along with her thoughts about her current family situation. Again, more context on that from Kevin Franke's lawyer. Our client is working with the prosecutor's office and anticipates resolving this matter quickly by entering a plea agreement with the court on Monday, December 18th. So what does that mean? Is she going to plead guilty? That was one of the big questions I'm getting. Answer is yes. If you're pleading not guilty, there's no agreement to be entered into with the state. If you win and they're not going to prosecute you anymore, they null pros or drop or dismiss the charges. You don't enter into a plea agreement. A plea agreement means a quid pro quo type of a deal, a bargain for exchange. I will plead guilty and do these punishments if you reduce my charges or lower the punishments that you're asking for or give me something in return. That's how a plea agreement works. Ruby Franke is a devoted mother and is a woman, also a woman committed to constant improvement. Initially, Ms. Franke believed that Jodi Hildebrandt had the insight to offer a path to continual improvement. Ms. Hildebrandt took advantage of this quest and twisted it into something heinous. Over an extended period of time, Ms. Hildebrandt systematically isolated Ruby Franke from her extended family, older children, and her husband, Kevin Franke. This prolonged isolation resulted in Ms. Franke's being subjected to a distorted sense of morality, shaped by Ms. Hildebrandt's influence. What does that tell you she is going to do? Well, I think we know she is going to point the finger at Jodi Hildebrandt. Not a surprise, pretty much exactly what we've expected the entirety of this case. If you listen or read between the lines of everything that has come out from Ruby Franke's side, from Kevin Franke's attorney, everybody seems to point the finger at Jodi Hildebrandt. Even a lot of the victims that have given interviews after the fact were victims of Jodi Hildebrandt, not of Ruby Franke. More on that in the interview from the lawyer and what their past has been as far as violence or abuse from either parent to either other parent or child. Additionally, when you take a plea deal, what happens sometimes? Well, sometimes you have to flip on the other defendant. You have to testify against the other defendant. And in return, you get a better deal, right? They talk about the first to flip gets the better deal. Well, sometimes it's just they want the head of the snake. And maybe they think, like a lot of people have surmised throughout the process, that Jodi Hildebrandt is actually the head of the snake. And Ruby Franke, if she testifies against Jodi Hildebrandt, that's actually what everybody wants at the end of the day. During Ruby Franke's incarceration in Washington County Jail over the past few months, she has actively engaged in an introspection that has allowed her to reset her moral compass and understand the full weight of her actions. So what does that do as with regards to a plea deal? Admitting wrongdoing, taking responsibility for your actions, committing to getting better, whether it's therapy, whether it's taking certain classes, whether it's community service, whether it's speaking to other people that are going through or dealing with or struggling with the same things you are. That statement to me, so far, we have potentially testifying against a co-defendant and acceptance of responsibility. These are all mitigating factors in a sentence. So when you take a plea deal and you do these things, your sentence gets less and less. So will she even end up serving any prison time? What's that going to look like? Those are questions that hopefully will be answered on December 18th, tomorrow, Monday, during that hearing. Miss Franke is committed to taking responsibility for the part she played in the events leading up to her incarceration. The part she played is important. Again, you can still take responsibility and point the finger at somebody else. I think this case is a perfect example of that. She absolutely has her own responsibility, but a lot of people thought she could be in the vortex of Jodi Hildebrandt, and that's the issue. Demonstrating a sincere dedication to personal growth and rehabilitation, she has actively begun the process by reaching out to members of her family. Through heartfelt apologies, she seeks to mend relationships and contribute positively to the healing journey of her family. And as we know, we've seen from both of her sisters and her life online, on YouTube, huge channels, huge followings. Will we hear about that publicly? My guess is yes. We've heard about just about everything publicly in this case. So maybe we'll hear more about what that's like. And I do think that reaching out to victims, mending those fences, having those people potentially testify on your behalf if it's a sentencing hearing or some kind of plea deal that the judge wants to hear, has it's actually been happening, that's a potential. I don't think we're going to see that on December 18th, but it's probably part of the process and the analysis and the equation of the judge trying to determine what is the appropriate sentence in this case. Or is the judge going to agree with the agreed upon sentence in this case, and the prosecutor's lessening what they're asking for in this plea agreement? Ruby is aware that Kevin Franke has filed for divorce. More on that from the video from Kevin Franke's attorney. While she is devastated by this news, she acknowledges and understands his anger and reasoning. Despite the pain, she respects his decisions and remains hopeful that with time, she can contribute to rebuilding trust and fostering understanding within their family. Ruby has offered her full cooperation to help the children reunite with their father. So is that something that makes us think that maybe there is going to be some prison time, or maybe she knows she's not going to get custody of them, at least not right now? Again, she's admitting a lot of fault here, I think, and she's admitting that she's not just going to come out of this scot-free, looking fine, smelling, what do they say, smelling like daisies or whatever the saying is. I think she knows that's not how this ends. Windward Law recognizes the profound love that Miss Franke holds for her children, and we are genuinely saddened that she found herself on this challenging path under the influence of Miss Hildebrandt. She found herself on this path under the influence of Jodi Hildebrandt. So again, pointing the finger at Hildebrandt, victimizing herself. I mean, she sounds like a victim in that statement, don't you think? It is our firm belief that Miss Franke is a devoted mother who unfortunately was led astray. So she ended up astray. They agree she ended up astray, but she was led there by Miss Hildebrandt. She is sincere in her commitment to securing the best possible future for her family. And we remain hopeful that with the right support and understanding, she can navigate a path of healing and growth. So she wants to navigate a path of healing and growth. So a couple of other things that were mentioned is her time incarcerated. She's been incarcerated for a period of time. And I think that's also important to consider when we're talking about what her sentence is going to end up being. And we talk about the fact that she's going to flip potentially on a co-defendant, testify against co-defendant, who is potentially the head of the snake that they're after. She is going to rehabilitate. She's going to take responsibility for what she's done. She's going to mend relationships with the victims and other people involved and other people affected. She wants to do community service, but she's also got time served. And what is the sentence going to be? Is she going to go to prison and do hard time? Or is it just going to be time served and some kind of supervised release, community service, whatever that may be, probationary period? Will it be a combination of the two? I really don't know how they're going to go about this because it depends on how bad they want to hit Jodi Hildebrandt. And when talking about Jodi Hildebrandt, when's her waiver hearing? December 27th. So a little over a week after Ruby Franke's. Will that turn into a plea hearing? Will that turn into a plea agreement? Will all of these cases be done before the end of the year? That would be pretty shocking. I don't think they're going to be as lenient on Jodi Hildebrandt. And I think there's going to be a lot of people showing up as potential victims in the past or victims of this case for Jodi Hildebrandt. And now that it looks like Ruby Franke and Kevin Franke and everybody else involved is pointing the finger at Jodi Hildebrandt, I'm assuming the Franke kids as well. What kind of deal could she possibly get? It wouldn't surprise me if everybody pled eventually in this case, as that happens in most cases, especially under these circumstances of the arrest and the evidence that's seemingly against Jodi Hildebrandt at this point. But it would be pretty surprising to me for that to happen this quickly. All right, changing gears. Let's get Kevin Franke's his attorney's interview from a couple weeks ago to talk about the Ruby Jodi connections discussion, the divorce filing, what the kids know, how the kids are, what's the custody like, what's the relationship like, now with the understanding that a guilty plea is coming. So I do think it's a little bit of a different perspective than anybody may have had if they have seen this interview before. This is the first time I'm watching this interview, so you're going to get my initial thoughts on it. I have seen the interview myself, I should say. It's the first time we're breaking it down on a video here to discuss the interview, but let's put it up on the screen here and discuss it together.
Expand upon that, just so for people who don't know, what exactly happened that caused this issue?
Fair question. Well, Jodi and Ruby had become partners through this connections business. Ruby had dumped the 8 passengers thing in favor of this connections business that Jodi was essentially.
So Ruby dumped the 8 passenger thing in favor of this. We knew the timing, but I could be naive to this. I didn't realize she dumped a huge YouTube channel in order for this connections business. How lucrative was it? How much business were they getting from the church even?
Even though she wasn't president of it, this Pam Deutsch was the president of Connections, but Jodi was the one doing all the therapy. She was the one recommending to almost a majority of her clients that in order to repair their families and repair their marriages, they needed to be separated. They needed to live apart because in her view, Kevin was lustful and Kevin was greedy and Kevin was self-absorbed. None of which was true. But through her therapeutic manipulation, she convinced him that he's characteristics and that if he stayed at home, he was going to poison the family.
So that's a little bit, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's a little bit different than our prior conversation, because my understanding was it was Ruby's decision that Kevin lived separately. Now it sounds like it was Jodi's decision, or is it Ruby through Jodi? Just so I understand.
It was Ruby through Jodi because.
And again, to me, that was the exact understanding from the beginning, and what everybody said was Jodi Hildebrandt's MO. Isolation, removing the husband from the situation, her taking control. And again, no surprises here that everybody is pointing the finger at this lady, Jodi Hildebrandt. That's where it seemed to have been going the entire time. And that's exactly what this interview reiterated. That's what Ruby Franke's attorney statement reiterated on Ruby's behalf. So, I mean, we can be pretty sure that's where this is going as far as, who the most culpable party is in these criminal actions.
Wrapped up in this program.
I wanted to ask you about the kids. First, how are they doing? And B, what is their reaction to the fact that their parents are going to get divorced?
Don't know what their reaction is. Don't even know if they know about it because they're not in Kevin's custody yet, and they're not in Ruby's custody, obviously. So to the extent they know about any of these filings, I don't know. haven't talked to Sherry or Chad. They're the two adults, but I'm sure the state's probably keeping the kids insulated from this.
Well, those are the adult children. So you're saying Kevin never even spoke to them about the fact that he was going to file for divorce?
I don't know. I haven't had a conversation with him about if he advised the older kids or not. My conversations have just been with him. So I don't know if he's advised the older kids or not.
As part of the, well, let me just go as far as you can tell. So there's a lot we don't know about this divorce filing. Is there any, can you give us any insight into what the grounds are for the filing? I mean, why he filed for divorce? There's always a number of different reasons and legal reasons, but there's a lot of it we don't know.
Sure. Well, in Utah, there are a number of alternatives that you can file under. You can file under mental cruelty, or the primary one that almost everyone uses is just simply to state there's irreconcilable differences. And clearly, in this case, the way that Ruby's treated the kids and treated the marriage and treated Kevin, certainly at the very least constitutes irreconcilable differences. That would foster a marriage in anyone's life. So we just filed.
So it was kind of a vague and general filing, which is what we thought. We read into some stuff. We talked about how some stuff was interesting. He's going to talk about some of the norms that they have in this state and how they're actually really helpful and good in these proceedings that keep people from hiding assets and doing things as part of the divorce case, but nothing specifically with regards to her criminal action, which I thought was interesting.
Under the generic term of irreconcilable differences, in that they certainly have differences of opinion about how to raise their kids and some other issues.
And those other issues, could you expand upon those?
They probably shouldn't at this point.
Okay.
I don't want to poison the well in terms of our divorce negotiations.
That's understandable. As part of the filing, there was also this domestic relations injunction that was filed. Why was this filed?
That's the court. Court issues that in every case. That's a court-issued injunction. It's not initiated by the parties or the attorneys. That's just an automatically generated injunction.
And it's interesting. That's different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So it's interesting to hear that that's just an automatic thing, which is why I think it's interesting and educational and fun to read these legal documents, try to figure out why. And sometimes it's just because it's needed and the court puts it in there in every case.
Comes out from the court once a petition is filed. The purpose is to preserve the estate so that you don't have people transferring money away, hiding assets, going out and doing damage to the marital estate or the family during the pendency of the divorce case. So it's a good tool. I think it's a good thing.
There's a lot in there that seems kind of, pro forma. Some of it I want to go through. There's a part that, they can't harass one another. They can't physically harm one another. Obviously, she's in jail. I mean, that wouldn't happen, but it did make me wonder, has there ever been allegations of domestic violence in the relationship between each other? Has she ever harmed him?
And this is an interesting discussion here. Have there ever been any allegations between them, right? Not outside, not people watching on YouTube, but between the two of them and within the family? Have there ever been any allegations of domestic violence in the past? Because we know that's what she's accused of today. And maybe this is going to come into effect as well. It should. In her plea negotiations, and what sentence she ends up getting is, does she have a history of this? Does she have a history of violence in her family, against her husband, against her kids? Has she ever been charged with anything in the past? I think we know she's never been convicted of anything like this, but this is an important question, and it is a resounding answer here. And again, this is somebody that's at odds with Ruby Franke, at least somewhat. They're on opposite sides of a divorce case now at this point, and it's telling to me that this is his answer.
Not a single time, nor has he her.
Okay.
There's never been an instance of any kind of, until these allegations came forward, there's never been any allegation of corporal punishment to these children, physical punishment. There's never been any allegation. And Kevin has been adamant about that. He neither physically touched or wrongfully touched Ruby, nor did she ever physically or wrongfully touch him.
And to me, that is really important. That is really important. And again, we're talking about between the two of them and from the kids. And obviously, there's a little CYA there with Kevin, covering himself, because if it did happen before these allegations, maybe he was around, maybe he was a part of it. But at the end of the day, I do think that that is an important distinction to make. A great question asked by Mr. Weber and a great answer given for everybody involved, especially if we're going to see a plea deal where, she's not doing hard prison time. I hope that is the case, that, this was something that Jodi was instituting and Ruby was just caught up in it and brainwashed or whatever, convinced to do it. And this is not something that was the norm for their kids. I hope that that is the truth.
Kevin hasn't gotten custody of the kids back. Can you tell us what the latest status of that is, where it is, how he's doing in trying to get the kids back?
Well, there's a process that the court sets up. It's sort of a one step at a time in terms of getting the kids back and in terms of helping them become rehabilitated from the trauma they've been through with Ruby and Jodi. And I think that's the state's objective, is to work them through that, professionally, therapeutically, as is.
A lot of people have asked about the kids' custody, so this I'm just providing as an update basically from him. So we understand where that part of the case is at. And then he also discusses their relationship with their dad, which I think is good.
Kevin. And so it's just a step-by-step process through the juvenile court with the objective of returning the children to Kevin.
Do you know what the kids want?
I can't speak to that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. What about Shari and Chad?
They're getting along great with their dad. They've spent a lot of time together. They were all together actually over the Thanksgiving holiday, and spent some time together as a family. And Shari and Chad are in constant contact with Kevin.
So that's great. And we've heard in the past, or we've talked about in the past, other videos about them accusing things of each other, but then they've been seen together. So it seems like that relationship is mended. That's important. That's good. And again, sometimes this stuff happens and it's a reality check for people, just like was in Ruby Franke's statement, and they reset themselves. They start doing what's right. They focus on what's right. They focus on what's important. They start building relationships back. The fame, the money, the power, all that stuff that maybe was starting to get to your head with, a huge YouTube channel with the connections, whatever that was, and people looking to you for advice, and you become this figure and you think you've gotten to some mountaintop or something. It can really screw up your priorities. So I'm hoping everybody's priorities are reset and they can get back on the right track of being a loving family. Even if, Ruby's not necessarily involved, whatever it looks like or whatever it is now, hopefully they're on that track. And some of this update here from this attorney for Kevin Franke is giving us a little insight into that.
That's not
Probably
that's
daily.
Because that's good to hear, because we did see reporting that there was tension between Shari and Kevin with respect to her coming to the house. He was curious if or not a police report could have been filed against, or criminal charges been filed against her for coming into the home. So how did they work through their differences?
Just by discussing with adults, one another, father to daughter, and they worked through all that. A lot of it was circumstantial. There were tensions and feelings were running pretty hot after that arrest of Ruby and finding out how Russell and how their children had been treated in Ruby's custody. I think even the older children were upset about that. Kevin was certainly upset.
I would think so. I would think everybody would be upset about that. But again, more insight. We watched these videos. We thought we knew what happened. It's confirming a lot of what we thought. Tensions were running high. Everybody was mad about what happened to the kids and thinking, how could you let this happen? Probably is what the older kids were thinking about dad. And obviously about Ruby, and dad was mad about what happened to his house. So, a lot of this is kind of what we surmised, but now some of it's being confirmed.
Said about it, and tensions were just running pretty high. There was some finger pointing going on, but they've resolved all that. Kevin was particularly upset that the front door of his home had been kicked in and things had been gone through, and the house was a mess. And he'd even been told that third parties who weren't even family members had been able to get into the house and take things or rifle through things or just walk through. And so when he found out some of his personal electronic materials had been taken,
right,
he was upset with Shari. But they've resolved all that. They're best friends now.
It's good to hear. It's good to hear. I was curious when the news broke that he filed for divorce. It made me think of Ruby's criminal case, and I was curious if the decision to file for divorce was motivated at all by what role he could potentially play in her criminal trial.
Did he want to separate himself from her? Did he want to make it seem like, look, we are not together. We are not one and the same. We are not two become one. We are not mended together anymore. Is that why he did this? That's the big question in connecting this. Again, this is, I think, a week or two ago. So this was before we knew she was going to plead guilty.
We didn't talk about that. He wasn't.
And he basically said, no, that didn't have anything to do with it. Now, we can believe it. We cannot. Is he posturing? I don't know. I'm going to back it up just so we can hear the question and the answer together again, and kind of see where he's coming from with that.
And I was curious if the decision to file for divorce was motivated at all by what role he could potentially play in her criminal trial.
No, we didn't talk about that. He wasn't a witness to any of this. If the state decides to call him as some kind of collateral witness pre-crime, I guess he'd have to go and testify. But that hasn't even crossed my mind that he might be called as a witness in the criminal case. His deliberations with me have been with regard to what's best for the family, what's best moving forward, and Ruby to some degree has already sort of parsed out. I don't know what, if any, jail time she's going to face, but I suspect there will be some, during which she can't have custody of the kids.
So he thinks that there is going to be some jail time, which I also thought was interesting. Again, this is before he knew she was going to plead guilty, but just based on what he knew back then, there is going to be some jail time is what he thinks. I would agree with that. I don't know how much, though. I would not expect a lot of jail time in addition to the time already served.
Hasn't had like follow-up conversations with prosecutors or law enforcement, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
I did want to ask you about this other development because we were actually.
So then the video kind of transitions into them discussing the new law that we talked about, where, whether or not these life coaches should have some kind of degree or some kind of certification or line that they have to cross before they can actually give official advice. So that's the update. Kevin Franke, the divorce filing had nothing to do with the criminal case, apparently. Ruby Franke is going to plead guilty tomorrow, potentially. If you guys want me to cover that hearing, drop it in the comments, and maybe that'll be the topic of the video tomorrow. Let me know, and we can do our reaction and breakdown and show some clips from that hearing if there is anything to show. But we know that Ruby Franke is going to take responsibility. We know she's going to plead guilty. We know she's going to point the finger at Jodi Hildebrandt. And there are some mitigating factors that will apply to her probably working on some collaboration for a sentence that is equal parts punishment, deterrence, rehabilitation, which is what she needs and what everybody needs when they see a case like this to know that this should not happen again in the future. But I appreciate you guys all joining me. Don't forget to leave your questions in the comments and hit that like button on your way out. Make sure you also hit that subscribe button. Maybe we'll be at 300,000 by the time you're watching this video. Maybe not. And if either way, hit that subscribe button if you guys want to follow more of these cases and these breakdowns. I appreciate you joining me. Hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their weekend. That's all we got. Till next time. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.